This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime.
India ranks third in global startup ecosystems. We're the youngest startup nation in the world with 72% of the founders less than 35 years of age. And hold on, as the panel has just corroborated, there's been a growth of at least 125% when we look at total funding this year in 2015 as opposed to what we saw in 2014. But let's just try and break down these headlines and what do they actually mean for all of us here in this space, which is said to be the most exciting entrepreneurial space in the world. And India is a space we're told that the world is watching our startups and what our youngsters are doing so very closely. Let me introduce my panel right away. Sanjeev Agarwal, Senior Managing Director at Helion Ventures, is with us. Rajat Tandon, VP NASSCOM 10,000 Startups, also joining us. Abhiraj Behel, co-founder Urban Clap, which is a marketplace for service providers. Also joining us from Bangalore, Arjun Zakaria, CEO and co-founder Whoopla, which is a fashion discovery platform. Thanks all so much for being with us here today. First and foremost, I'll take this straight to Abhiraj and Arjun, this growth of 125% in funding that we're now seeing this year. There was a time initially when they said that funding is one of the toughest things to do. Now they're saying, it's not that much of a headache at all. You need other systems in place. You need everything else in place. Has that been your experience?
So no, not quite. I think it continues to be difficult to raise capital. The example that I use with all my team members is, go and ask your dad to lend you 10 lakhs and see how difficult that is. Multiply that, a few hundred times. It's not easy for somebody who's not even related to you. I think there has been exuberance. People have taken a large interest in the Indian ecosystem. I actually believe that, we are seeing the start of a fairly, the next decade will be about India Internet. Lots of interesting billion-dollar companies will emerge. That will also mean that a lot of companies won't succeed.
Arjun, has that been your experience as well? What would you say? Is funding still problem number one?
Sure, funding is a problem even today, but if I would look at the way funding is divided, right, you only have a seed funding and then you have the series fundings that happens. Earlier, even the seed stage funding was very difficult because there were not many people who believed in the idea of startups and they hadn't seen any results. But today, we have so many entrepreneurs who are already heading unicorn companies. So those guys, and there's a whole ecosystem of seed investors that have grown in the past 2-3 years, which makes it relatively easier for ideas to go beyond the paper to action. And that is what has changed. Since the time when we started, even that was very difficult. Even to get a check of 10 lakh rupees was very difficult from an investor. But today you have a lot of these, even platforms like Let's Venture or other these single investors out there who actually are willing to write checks and take your idea to the next step. So that's a big change.
Which is why the space is also buzzing that the way it is, because they're coming fresh out of college or with their tech degrees or otherwise eager to try something new with these great ideas. Mr. Agarwal, and then I'll get Rajat Tandon in. It's fair to, of course, say the point that Abhiraj made, that there are so many more people vying for the funding. But Arjun's point also being that there are more people now interested in putting their money out there, in betting on you. Is that a fair assessment?
I think the quantum of capital pursuing startups certainly has been doubling for last 3-4 years. So that's no news. And I think there is more depth in the financial market. As Arjun said, starting from seed to Series A to Series B to late stage capital. I think we will see a big inflection in the startup ecosystem when companies can begin to go public. Because right now, India has by and large seen infusion of capital, but very little has been returned. And
That's
for
right.
more capital to come into the ecosystem, you need to start posting runs on the board.
Right. Given our young population, given our numbers, hopefully that's where we are headed. Mr. Nanda, there are all those who constantly sort of look at funding or look at other issues in the space and say, take the more circumspect or perhaps even glass half empty view. I mean, they'll say things like, is this like the dot-com bubble? Look what's happening here, look what's happening there. What would you say to them?
I think it's too early to mention anything of that stature. Year 2013, we had about 700 startups who were coming annually. Right. Year 2015, we have about 1,200. Look at the percentage; it's about 40-45% growth, which has happened over a period. And what we are predicting that by 2020, we're probably going to have close to 2,100 startups or 2,100 startups annually in the country. And as you see, the profile also of the startups. Today, literally 72% of the startups are below, I would say, 35 years of age. So there is a lot of opportunity which is coming on place. There's a lot of scope. Certain things which need to kind of get regulated, or I would say, defined around policies and certain areas which need to be focused on, which certainly will get some more investments in the country. And as Sanjeev was also mentioning about, investments. Today, I would say 8 out of the 10 top VCs are in India, right? But in terms of look at the number of angel investors, it's very few. While this has grown over last year, I would say if I recall,
not enough.
Still not enough.
But I'm going to sort of look at the problems and all of that, the ease of doing business and all of that in just a bit. But tell me one thing, Abhiraj, if you sort of step aside from the money for a bit, it's supposed to be an exciting space and all of that, but the headlines are usually taken by the big guys. Headlines are, seem to be that to a certain section, a startup is still, say, a Flipkart or a Snapdeal, or they haven't sort of gone beyond those headlines. How frustrating is it?
It's not frustrating, I think. I think every early stage company, like ours, like Woopler and others, one of the biggest challenges for us is to be very, very focused on building the business. Everything else can come in the way as distractions. So I think when you're so engrossed in just building the business, focusing on what are the right things to do, as Sanjeev said, do that for 10 years and you can have a fair shot at building a large company which can return the dollars invested by your investors. I think that has to be the biggest focus, and if that can be the biggest focus of entrepreneurs, of people who are talking about funding and of startups, then I think we are heading in the right direction.
Before I take this to Arjun, let me get Mr. Agarwal in again. When if somebody like Abhiraj is to come to you looking for advice, increasingly we have people investing their money saying it's not just our money, it's our time, it's our ideas. It's a package deal now. You come to us, bounce your ideas off us. We don't give you the money and exit. There's so much more. What are the things that you're looking for beyond just having an exciting idea? Because people write to us to say, I have a great idea, believing that that's all it takes. That's not be all and end all, is it?
I think a couple of things, Natasha. Venture investors are looking for very large problems to be solved. So one like Urban Clap is solving a very large services problem. They're bringing a fragmented industry online. And two, I think some competitive advantage. It can be an early mover, it can be some unique technology. And three, I think more than the idea, we are beginning to find it's the management team. I have this favorite phrase of what I call Brahma and Vishnu. That in any team there should be this Brahma and Vishnu. One is the forward-looking thinker, and other is the one who minds the store, gets stuff done. So I think those kind of characteristics.
The doers, really.
Yeah, the doers, thinkers and doers.
Right. Arjun, come in here. Increasingly, while of course funding, the point that you've made, Abhiraj has made, funding of course still a key issue, but increasingly people are saying finding the right team, if there are co-founders, getting the co-founder who's going to be in sync with you, finding the team who believes in your idea is really critical. Personally, how much of a challenge have you faced in that department?
So I would agree with what Abhiraj and Sanjeev said, is that team is everything, and it's very important at day zero to decide the co-founders that you're going to work on with an idea, because as Sanjeev mentioned, the idea might have small pivots or it might end up being entirely different. But what works is how a set of co-founders stick together. There will be a lot of lows initially because there's no capital, there is less traction, there is still no validation out there, and that's at a time when you still need to keep going, focused on what you set out to do, and that's where a team works.
And did you always want a fashion discovery platform, or did you start off with another idea and then decide that this is actually perhaps a better fit, or have there been minor tweaking along the way?
We did a few minor tweaks in terms of the focus, being women, in terms of being fashion, and fashion specifically being fast fashion. So these are some of the things that over the period changed, but these are not things that we had thought initially, but that we, on the course of building the company, we realized from our consumers, our customers, and the market dynamics.
I have a bit of a personal disagreement there, which is basically I think Indian men could use some fashion tips also, but we'll leave that aside. Even as you focus on women, we'll leave that aside. Rajat Tandon, increasingly, the point that Sajid's making, the point that everyone's saying is that you need to find that vacuum that's out there, and you need to know how you're going to fill it. Now, we're looking at a space where there's a lot of action. Look at what's happening with food delivery, and there's a lot of hand wringing and chest beating, and people will say, "Dekha, this is a space that's heating up too quickly. Yehi hona hai. This is going to happen across sector." What would you say to the cynics?
So I would say there are a lot of ideas, and I think the newer generation is getting up with fantastic new ideas, a lot of insights, and they're going to look at solving new problems. But again, if I were to step out in terms of healthcare, there is one doctor per every 1,700 patients, right, or people. So there's immense opportunity to put something in the healthcare, right? Look at opportunities in the power division, where there is so much of tremendous, close to about $7 billion of power loss in the country, right? Why don't we have some innovative startups putting up some IoT stuff and looking at building management?
Why don't we?
So in terms of that's where I would say right now everybody is chasing the e-commerce dream, right? So we have more to deliver other than that. Whether I just come out from e-commerce, I want to go to infrastructure, I want to go to healthcare, I want to go to agriculture, I want to go to building management. There are multiple scopes for people. Yeah.
Right. Do you sort of find yourself saying that people often, that why chase this? The point that Mr. Tandon's making, these are sort of the more sort of cool, aspirational places perhaps to be in. At least if you're end user or sort of an Aam Aadmi, this is the space that you sort of think is cool. Do you find yourself telling people that there are other options, the kind of options that Mr. Tandon's talking about? Look at these options? Because some places might be getting saturated.
Natasha, my sense is that entrepreneurs are much smarter than investors. So we telling an entrepreneur what to do.
They wouldn't be saying funding is so tough in that case.
So we telling an entrepreneur to do, we have no business. And I must say that the quality of entrepreneurs that we are seeing circa 2010 onwards, there is a night and day difference, and ideas I think are very differentiated. Take for example Arjun's company. It's the next version of e-commerce, very different from Myntra, right? So people are actually iterating very smartly on their business models. Or Urban Clap, solving a very large unorganized industry problem, which I'm sure you as a person who runs a home experience every day. It's very hard to get a consistent plumber who shows up on time and does a good job of delivery.
How does it sort of strike you? Is there sort of a personal incident or an anecdote that you can share with us?
It was all very unorganized, lack of trust. You don't know if the guy who's, the price that he's quoting, if that's the right price. So somebody had to solve it. It was daunting, and it still is extremely daunting for us. We've hardly done anything. But I think what was clear to us was that, hey, somebody is going to build the Amazon for services. This is not going to be the way it is 10 years out. 10 years out, service professionals, internet will play a significant role in the business that it is driving to them. And we said, why don't we just go out there and build it?
That's really wonderful, because I think what sets you apart is that someone like me, for instance, and I'm sure I speak for many of our viewers out there, has sort of felt this, wanted to do something about it, and sort of, grumbled about, kuch nahi milta hai, nothing happens, what's going on. And it sort of never struck most of us that you can do something like this. So the idea, of course, being very, very important. Arjun, come in here. The fact is that you need to, again, we come back to the idea, look to find that vacuum and then fill it. How does one sort of make the balance, or does the choice, I mean, is that even fair to ask?
It's generally not a choice that I say, okay, I want to go and do a startup, say, in fashion space, and then I go about finding ideas. I believe that's a wrong approach to take. It's about you keep looking out, you see ideas that, you see things that need to be fixed. So, for example, in our case, we felt that there was no way for a person to actually shop fashion based on the kind of person that I am, or the kind of trends that were outside there, or the kind of social links that I had out there. There was no way for me to decide my wardrobe rather than just a discounted model out there.
Right.
That is what we wanted to change.
Right.
So I am from a security background. I used to work at McAfee before this. So for me, a more gradual approach would have been to do a startup in the security tech space.
Right.
But I ended up making Woopla because I felt there was a huge gap out there. There was no one solving it at that time.
Right.
So why don't we just go and fix it?